In January of 1926, the Religious Bulletin out of the University of Notre Dame ran a series of short articles called The Price You Pay for the Modern Girl. This video will be based on the series, and I'll add some commentary of my own. The Religious Bulletin also wrote a follow-up on the modern boy, so sooner or later I'll do a video on that one too. By modern girl, the article was referring to a group of young women that included flappers. In the wake of the First World War, modernism crept into society just as it did with the Second World War later, and it changed values and morals. Flappers were emblematic of that. However, the things that made flappers notorious in the 1920s have become accepted and commonplace in our own time. The series in the Religious Bulletin is interesting in that it seems to reach out from a century ago, and it warns us about our own times. Yet there are some things it seems to have gotten wrong. The Bulletin cited this cartoon, which had run in the Chicago Tribune. It said that the cartoonist represented society as having swung to the extreme of materialism, degraded ideals, extravagance, indulgence, and lawlessness. The priest who wrote the Bulletin speculated that the pendulum had swung back as far as it had gone forward, and hoped that the pendulum would swing in the opposite direction with the next generation. One of the nicest things about the article in the Bulletin was its hope and optimism that it had for the future. Unfortunately, with hindsight, we can now see that the pendulum has only swung even further in the wrong direction. The priest wrote, "Do you believe that your mother felt that she could not have a good time at a dance unless she was half drunk or passed out? Do you believe that your mother felt insulted if her dancing partner did not kiss her or otherwise intrude upon her maidenly modesty?" It's been now about a century since the 1920s. Though the young men from 1926 probably couldn't imagine their mothers in such a condition, now that modernism has been a fixture in society, I imagine that nowadays it might be different, and many young men nowadays perhaps could imagine their mothers that way, though it might vary from person to person. The article continued, "Do you believe that your father was a degenerate rake on weekdays, but then went to church on Sundays? Do you believe that he would take advantage of any girl who might come along, provided no one found out about it?" Again, I wonder whether the current generation would answer this question differently from the young men of the 1920s. Though the times have changed, there is still a lot in the series that speaks out to us one century later. The article notes that many of the flappers and cake eaters of the 1920s were getting married. If you're wondering what a cake eater is, please see my prior video on cake eaters, which I have linked down below. Basically, the cake eater was the male counterpart to the flapper. The priest in the Bulletin noted that there were husbands and wives who are not fathers and mothers. They only entered marriage as some sort of legalized concubinage. They did this for social reasons, money, or one thing or another. Sex for the sake of pleasure alone is the foul idol of their worship. When one partner gets tired of the other, another partner is brought in without any divorce. So what price do you pay for the modern girl? If you indulge her drinking or taking drugs, you'll surely regret it someday. Do you now violate the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is her body? She will remind you of that someday, after she has publicly disgraced you, and then she will remind you that you are one of many, and they had just as much right to her as you did. Do you think it's cute when she swears? How do you think you'd feel when she blasphemes in front of your children? Do you ever ask her to lie for you? Then don't be surprised to discover that she's been lying to you too. Not only that, but the modern girl might have a profound effect on you. We've all probably seen young men who we thought were of good upstanding character, but once they fall in with bad company or a bad girl, they show that they were actually very weak-willed and easily influenced. Ultimately, they become mired in degeneracy in order to please the girl or to please the crowd. Very few people ever pull out of that kind of nosedive. The secular world tells us that the modern girl is just fine. She's fashionable. Though a lot of the secular world says that there are things that are right and wrong, they don't acknowledge that truth cannot change. The secular world has no objective standards as to what might be right and what might be wrong. What is right and wrong is just what the majority thinks at any given moment in time. It changes from year to year and even month to month. To the secular world, what the modern girl thinks and does is just fine. Many in the secular world will lecture you and tell you that what is right and wrong is just a matter of opinion, and no one is allowed to judge the behavior of others. Authentic Catholicism is the only sure compass to keep a man grounded and to prevent him from chasing after the fads and norms of his age. And today, the only way to find authentic Catholicism is in traditional Catholicism. So what does a young man need to look for in a woman? First, he should ask himself whether she's virtuous. There are plenty great examples of Catholic womanhood. Many, if not most men who call themselves Catholic, aren't all that interested in a good, virtuous Catholic girl. They're looking for something a little more dangerous. They'd rather get some easy thrills. God created passion, or the pleasure there is in the act by which man procreates. God created it to allow man to share with him the lofty power of creation. St. Augustine wrote, "Passions are evil if our love is evil, and passions are good if our love is good. Passion is a good thing when it is used as a means to a proper end, which is a stable marriage and the bringing up of children for God. Passion is a despicable thing. It is shameful, degrading, and destructive of every noble thought in man when it is sought for illicit pleasure. Marriage is not merely a partnership between a man and a woman. It is a partnership between a man, woman, and God. And when a man and woman deliberately try to cheat God out of their immortal souls, which he had wanted for heaven, the man and the woman will necessarily answer to God for their foulness. God is not mocked." One big difference between the time the article was written and now is that modern marriages are usually producing fewer children. It is not surprising that this is coupled with the current generations getting more divorces, or not bothering to get married at all. Children keep a marriage stable. They demand sacrifice. They demand the father and mother to be home at night. The article cited this editorial from the Chicago Tribune, dated May 20th of 1925. A generation or two ago, sex was a matter for the biological laboratories and not for the funny papers. The American woman was on her pedestal, and respect for her was instinctive, as all the travelers from abroad used to write in their memoirs. Since then, a revolution in the status of woman has taken place in this country. She has definitely entered into competition with men in the world of affairs. She has all the opportunities for education in this world, some which were reserved for men only. She is man's equal in political life. She has become superior before man in marriage law because he is supposed to support her, and she doesn't have to support him. She has abandoned her pedestal and is standing on her own feet. She goes further. She tries her best to trample the toes of the men who are competing with her in industry, trade, the professions, and the arts, by insisting upon a code of conduct which presumes that she is still a helpless inferior. Sisters abuse the male sex upon every occasion. Chivalry was born when men possessing all the power and all the privileges volunteered to wait on and cherish the helpless. It was the finest moral development the world has ever known. Feminism has killed it. The Religious Bulletin goes on to say that part of the editorial is true. Chivalry did set women upon a pedestal, and the modern woman has descended from it. However, the Tribune also got part of it wrong. The editorial overlooked the supernatural background of chivalry. Catholic chivalry always included devotion to the Blessed Mother of God. It was Catholicism and devotion to the Blessed Mother that raised women from their prior status as chattel. The woman was the queen of her own home and counselor to her husband. She had rights. That made her the inspiration and guiding star for her husband, and her encircling arms were the sanctuary of the frightened and erring child. Now that paganism has replaced Christianity, women have gone back to their prior status of being objects. Women have done this voluntarily. Fashions, makeup, body piercings, tattoos, all these things modern women cling to, and these things only enhance their roles as objects, as upon things to be looked upon. Though these things are only outward signs, they signal a wounded soul. There seems to be no attempt in modern society to raise men up to the high standard that woman had once held. Instead, the woman steps down from her pedestal to share in the degeneracy of the worst of men. God created women for men. He created man to be aggressive, and he gave women a cooler disposition to temper man's passion. He gave women modesty to protect her purity. When modern women despise God's gift, his plan is disturbed. However, Catholic chivalry will never completely die out. As long as men say the Memorare to a woman, the Blessed Mother, and ask her to inspire within them noble thoughts, as long as Catholic men continue to swear allegiance to all that is pure in women, and to venerate, in the virginity and motherhood of the Blessed Mother, all that is highest and best in motherhood, chivalry will live on. Catholic chivalry can never die, because authentic Catholicism will never pass away. It will be triumphant in heaven and for all eternity, even after the earth ceases to exist. Modern pagan minds can't understand this, because they can't understand the source of our spiritual strength. Puny minds can't understand it either, because the idea is just too big for them. Unfortunately, many young Catholic men who profess to be Catholic also can't understand it. They try to fit in with their pagan pals, and because they are weak, they sink into degeneracy. A jackass cannot understand Catholic chivalry. It is easy to be weak. It's difficult to be strong. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be back again within a week with another one. But in the meantime, please check out my Facebook page and my Twitter page. Every day I post additional content that you won't find on this YouTube channel. And also, please pray for the church.